السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Welcome back to another discussion from our Ramadan series, Living with Prophet Yusuf. We stopped in the last class at the portion of this story where the brothers of Yusuf brought the shirt drenched in blood that was not the blood of Yusuf, and they were crying. And this is ayat number 16, Surah 12, ayat 16, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءُوا أَبَاهُمْ عِشَاءً يَبْكُونَ. And they came to their father at night, weeping. And they said to their father, قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَا إِنَّا ذَهَبْنَا نَسْتَبِقُ وَتَرَكْنَا يُوسُفَ عِنْدَ مَتَاعِنَا فَأَكَلَهُ الذِّئْبُ. They said, "Oh, our father, we went racing with one another and we left Yusuf by our belongings, and a wolf ate him." This was the story. A wolf ate him. And that you will never believe us, even if we are truthful. And the father noticed on the shirt that they brought, وَجَاءُوا عَلَى قَمِيصِهِ بِدَمٍ كَذِبٍ. And they bought a shirt. The shirt actually belonged to Yusuf, but the shirt was soiled in blood, but the blood was not the blood of Yusuf. And Yaqub, he noticed the shirt had no rips in it. You know, there's no way that a wolf ate my son, and this is his shirt, and the shirt has no holes in it, no rips in it, no tears in it. And as Yaqub said to his sons, مَا أَرْحَمْ الذِّئْبِ بِإِبْنِي. And how merciful was this wolf with my son that he didn't even bother to tear the shirt. He didn't even bother to rip the shirt up. All right. And he said to them, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. He said, no, this is something that your own selves, this is something that you all have made up from yourselves. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. It is nothing left for me to do except exercise beautiful patience. Beautiful patience. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, a sabrun jameel, beautiful patience, is a sabr bila shakwa, is the type of patience that is exercised, that has no complaint in it, except if you are complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Yaqub himself said, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I only complain of my grief and my sorrow only to Allah, and I know about Allah that which you do not know. So Yaqub, he reserved himself to just be patient. He said, sabrun jameel, not just any type of patience, but the type of patience that is beautiful. Described by Yaqub as beautiful, a beautiful patience. And this is the type of patience that has absolutely no complaining in it, no fretting, no complaining, right? Just knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of this story, at the end of this issue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose what is, the truth of the matter. And the scholars, they explain a sabr ala thalathatu anwa'. That sabr, patience, is three types. There are three types of patience. There's a sabr ala ta'atillah. There is patience in being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because being obedient to Allah requires patience. Some people burn out because they don't have the stamina. They don't have the endurance. They don't have the stamina. Patience in being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Being obedient to Allah requires patience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعْبُدَ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينُ. Worship Allah until death overtakes you. Meaning that this journey of obedience to Allah and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no sabbatical. There is no time off. There is no, vacations. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consistently, constantly until death overtakes us. That requires endurance. That requires patience. That requires, for a person to have some type of stamina. So, as-sabr ala ta'atillah, being patient and being obedient to Allah. As-sabr an ma'asiyatillah, being patient and staying away from disobeying Allah. because shaitan makes disobedience seem beautiful. It looks like everybody else that's disobeying God, it looks like they're having fun. It looks like they're enjoying themselves in the midst of their disobedience. So to remain patient in staying away from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying, as I tell my students all the time, do you think that as adults, when we see people partying, drinking, and, looks like they're enjoying themselves, do you think that we don't think about doing that? You don't think we want to do that? There's a part of us that have lived that life. Some of us have lived that life before. And weaning ourselves off of that life was a very difficult process. And now when we see people drinking, see people smoking, see people partying, see people, doing what, people who are heedless of God and heedless of divine consequences do, you don't think that we want to do those things? Absolutely, we want to do those things. Some of us, we want to engage in some of that behavior. It wasn't all bad, It wasn't all bad, but we refrain from that. We are patient in staying away from disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last is al-sabr ala aqdarillah, being patient with the qadr of Allah. And this is what applies to Yusuf here. The third type of patience is being patient with the qadr of Allah. Why being patient with the qadr of Allah? Because in the qadr of Allah, in the things that God decreed for us, in the things that Allah decreed for us, are things that are bitter. Everything that Allah decreed for us, we believe that our entire lives was written. We believe that our entire path has already been written. All we're doing is playing the part. All we're doing is playing the part by choice, because we do have a choice in the matter. However, in the things that Allah decreed for us, some of those things are bitter. In the things that Allah decreed for us, sometimes is the loss of a loved one. Sometimes is the loss of a relative. Sometimes is the loss of a friend. Sometimes is the loss of, body parts. You know what I mean? Like, in the things that Allah decreed to happen to us, sometimes there's murr, it's bitter. Which is why the Prophet ﷺ said, "And tu'min bil qadr khayrihi wa sharrihi," to believe in the qadr, the good of it and the bitter of it. So we are patient with the qadr of Allah. There are things that we have no control over that happen to us in our lives for reasons that are beyond our ability to conceive. And we have to be patient with that. Whether we understand it, whether God gives us a window into his wisdom or not. We know that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for us is good for us. However, sometimes in the things that are good for us is bitter. It can be bitter. All right. So lesson number 17, right? Because when the guys from the caravan, when they lowered their bucket into the well and Yusuf grabbed on to the bucket and they began pulling him up, once they saw him, they said, "Ya Bushra hada ghulam." Look at this beautiful little boy. Yusuf's beauty, there were so many people that were affected by Yusuf's beauty. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Mururtu bi akhi Yusuf, fa idha qad a'tahu Allahu shatara al-jamal." The Prophet ﷺ said on the night journey, on the night ascension, as he passed by some of the levels of the heavens, he passed by some of the prophets and messengers. He said, "And I passed by my brother Yusuf. فَمَرَرْتُ بِأَخِيمْ Yusuf. I passed by my brother Yusuf. فَإِذَا قَدْ أَعْطَاهُ اللَّهُ نِصْفَ شَطْرَ الْجَمَالِ. I passed by my brother Yusuf, and there it was that God had given him half of all of the beauty of the world. Meaning Allah blessed Yusuf with half of all beauty and then gave the other half to the world. So all of the beauty that we marvel at of the world, that's only half. That's only half of the beauty that was given to Yusuf. And his beauty affected everyone that laid eyes on him. Every single individual that laid eyes on him throughout this story was affected by Yusuf's beauty, starting with his father. His father, obviously, seeing how beautiful he was. His father was affected by his beauty. His stepmothers, right? Yaqub's other wives. After Yusuf's mother died, right? the co-wives amongst themselves were arguing and bickering with one another about who was going to take ownership of Yusuf, who was going to take guardianship of Yusuf because of how beautiful he was. He was affected. His father was affected by his beauty. His stepmothers were affected by his beauty. His brothers were obviously affected by his beauty, right? Because they're looking at how Yaqub inclines towards him more than them. They're looking at themselves and then looking at Yusuf like, wow, man, look at this guy. Then on top of that, the men on the caravan, when they dropped the bucket into the well and he pulled up this little boy, they looked at how beautiful he was. Ya bushra hadha al-ghulam. Look at this beautiful little boy. They were affected by his beauty. وَأَصَرُّهُ بِضَاعَةً. And they tucked him away to the side. They didn't let everybody else on the caravan know that they had found a little boy because they were going to sell him. It's like finding a needle in the haystack, finding a diamond in the rough, whatever idiom you want to use, right? They were affected by his beauty. And as we're going to see later on, the king of Egypt was affected by his beauty, including the wife of the Aziz of Egypt. The governor of Egypt was affected by his beauty. So he purchased Yusuf, and the wife of the Aziz, of the governor of Egypt, was even affected by Yusuf's beauty in that she tried to seduce him. She couldn't resist. That brings me to lesson number 17. Lesson number 17, beauty can be a blessing and a curse all at the same time. Beauty can be a blessing and a curse all at the same time. So pay attention. While we marvel at how handsome we are and how beautiful we are, and then we have, of course, Instagram, to, let the world know how beautiful we are. Think about how your beauty is becoming a fitna for you. If you are a young woman right now and you are in the habit of going on Instagram and taking off your hijab and dolling yourself up with makeup and posting pictures of yourself with, half clad and, scantily clad and, your overgarment is skin tight and people can see the shape of your body, understand how your beauty is becoming a fitna for you. Your beauty is a fitna for you. Understand how that works. For the men, Muslim men who are on social media and you posting pictures with your guns out and your tattoos, your haram tattoos all over your body, you should be ashamed of showing the world that you have this. But there's no shame. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحْيِ فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. And if you have no modesty, you have no shyness, then do as you please. Meaning, if you have no modesty and you have no shyness, you will do as you please. And you posting pictures of yourself with tattoos all over your body, tattoos that are post-Islam. These are not tattoos that you got before you converted to Islam. These are tattoos that you got while you were Muslim, while you were cognizant of the fact that the tattoo and the one who gets the tattoo and the one who does the tattooing are both cursed, which is an indication that it is a major sin. And something that you have to answer for, Yawm al-Qiyamah. But we'll do it all for the gram. We'll risk it all for the gram. We'll risk it all for the gram. Amazing how Muslim women have gone from wearing all black, wearing niqab, wearing, overgarments and, to now wearing practically nothing. This is what has happened to the hijab. This is what has happened under the guise of fashion, Islamic fashion, Muslim fashion. Muslim fashion should meet the guidelines of Islam. And that at the top of those guidelines is modesty, haya. And we're losing that. The haya amongst our women, gone. Anyway, so understand how beauty can be a blessing, but also a curse at the same time. So for Yusuf, his beauty affected people in a positive way, like his father caused him to love him more. The Aziz, the governor of Egypt, who, because he saw how beautiful it was, it caught his attention and he purchased Yusuf as a result of that. So his beauty had a positive effect on people and it also had a negative effect on people, which is exactly what happens today. A woman is beautiful. You go to school. We dress our daughters up. We put nice clothes on them. We send them off to school. And she makes friends because of how cute she is. And she makes some enemies because of how cute she is. Our sons, we get them nice haircuts. We buy them Jordans. We buy them Yeezys. We buy them nice stuff. We send them off to school. As a result of how they look, they and I'm not just talking about physical beauty, but also internal beauty. Internal beauty, beauty of character. Jamal al-khuluq, the beauty of character, also can be a trial as well. All of us would love nothing more than to act just like our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but sometimes acting like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can get you killed. Acting like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can get you taken advantage of. You understand? If you act like a sheep, you're going to attract wolves. And so sometimes we want to act like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are moments when you know what the Prophet would have done in that situation, but you know if you do that in this situation right here, this individual is going to take full advantage of you. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I cannot do it. I would love more. I would love nothing more than to extend to you the mercy that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam extended to Quraysh, extended to other people who wronged him and harmed him. But there are some times when extending mercy to someone is enabling them to continue oppressing you. You understand? Sometimes extending mercy to a person is only enabling them to continue oppressing you. And in that moment, you opt for another behavior of the Prophet ﷺ, and that is akhdul haqq, to take your right back from that person. You understand? The Prophet ﷺ wasn't no pushover, right? In the hadith of the Urainiyin, right? These people from Uraina, right? They came, they were suffering from some type of plague, some type of disease. They had a stomach disease. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that I have, a farm. Go out to my farm and tell the farmers that work for me, tell them to give you some of the camel's urine. Because they drink the camel's urine, because in the camel's urine is a cure for the disease that is in your stomach. It's a cure for the disease. What do? They go out to the desert, to the Prophet ﷺ's farm. They murdered the two farmers or the three farmers that were looking after the farm of the Prophet ﷺ, and took all of the Prophet's sheep, took all of his goats, took everything. Murdered them, robbed them. He's robbing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hadith sahih. This is authentic narration. What do you think the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did? Do you think he said, okay, Allah will forgive them, I'll forgive them? La wallahi, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered the Sahaba to go find them. Go find them. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam found them, what do you think he did to them? You got to read the rest of the hadith for that. He wasn't no pushover, man. When he conquered Mecca, he said all of the people in Mecca are forgiven with the exception of 7. Whenever you find them, kill them. It's no forgiveness. You understand? The Prophet ﷺ was no pushover. He was no pushover. And we have a habit of painting the Prophet ﷺ as, in each and every situation, it should be mercy. It should be compassion in every single situation. The Prophet ﷺ was not merciful and compassionate. Well, yes, he was, because mercy and compassion looks different in each and every situation. For some people, mercy and compassion looks like, I'm just going to let you go. And in some situation, mercy and compassion means I'm going to take my right back from you. I'm going to take my right back from you and you're not going to like it. That's mercy and compassion for you. Because if I didn't do that to you, you would think that you could do the same thing to other people. What did the Prophet ﷺ do to the Urainiyin? He had the Sahaba go find them, and he branded their eyes shut. Cut off their hands and their feet and branded their eyes shut and left them out in the desert to find their way. If you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. That's on you. But you murdered my farmers and you robbed me for my stuff. I will lie. Prophet ﷺ didn't let that go. So even internal beauty can be a fitna, right? Can be a trial. So understand, if your beauty becoming, a trial for you, because beauty can be a blessing and it can also be a curse at the same time. All right. So that's your lesson number 17. We move on to ayat number 20. All right. You following me? Ayat number 20. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. And they sold him, meaning they sold him for a cheap price, meaning the brothers of Yusuf sold Yusuf to the men in the caravan. The brothers of Yusuf pulled up on the scene, saw that they had Yusuf, and said, no, that's our slave. He belongs to us. We'll sell him. وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. They sold him for a cheap price. Some scholars say that this means that the caravan took him to Egypt and they sold him in Egypt for a cheap price. At any rate, he was sold twice. The brothers sold him to the men in the caravan, and the men in the caravan took him to Egypt, from Palestine to Egypt, and they sold him again when they got to Egypt. But how do we know? How do we know that that he was sold? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ. They sold him for a cheap price. دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. For a few dirhams. That is pointing back to the brothers of Yusuf. Because they sold him, as the scholars mentioned in the tafsir, that they sold him for 20 dirhams. And each brother, each of the 10 brothers, took 2 dirhams apiece. They sold him for a few dirhams. 20 dirhams, they sold their brother for 20 silver coins, each of them taking 2 coins. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. وَكَانُوا, pay attention to the end of the ayah. We're on ayat number 20. We're on ayat number 20. What does Allah say at the end of the ayah? وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. And they considered him insignificant. لَا قِيمَةَ لَهُ. There was no qima, there was no worth. They saw Yusuf, their own brothers, to be worthless. They saw their own brothers to be, they saw the brothers of Yusuf, they saw him to be worthless. He's worth nothing. وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. They sold him for a cheap price because they didn't see any worth in him. That's the time that we're living in, where the world doesn't see any worth in you. The world doesn't see any worth in you. Like the hadith of Zahir, where the Prophet ﷺ stood behind Zahir and grabbed him like this. And he said jokingly, "Man yashtari hadha al-abd?" Who will buy the slave? And Zahir, he said, "Ya Rasulullah, la tajiduni kasidan la yashtarini ahad." He said, "O Messenger of Allah, you will find me worthless. I'm worthless. La qimata li. There's no value in me." Why does Zahir say that about himself? He didn't say that about himself because that was naturally how he felt, but that was the way that the world saw him. We are a reflection of the way that the world sees us. If you keep telling your child, "You're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid," eventually the child will grow up to believe that they are stupid. If you tell your child you are incompetent, there's no good in you, you're going to end up like your father, you're going to end up like your uncles. What do you think the child is going to do except end up like his father or end up like his uncles? You just made dua against your child and you don't even realize it. You just made dua against your child, and we all know the power of words to bring the unseen into fruition. Human beings, we have the power to translate words into thought, into words, and from words into fruition. We have the power to do that. Be mindful. Self-fulfilling prophecy, absolutely. Be mindful. What did the mother of Jurayj say? When Jurayj refused to answer his mother on three occasions, she called Jurayj and he's praying and he ignored his mother. What did his mother? She got so angry. She said, "Allahumma la tumithu hatta yanzur fi wujuh al-mumisat." Oh Allah, do not allow him to die until he looks into the faces of prostitutes. She made dua against her own child out of anger. And we have to be mindful that as parents, sometimes we do that to our children. We say things like, "Keep acting up, you're going to end up in jail. Keep acting up, you're going to end up like this one or that one. You see what happened to your friend, you're going to end up like that." You're actually speaking something into fruition. You're speaking something into fruition. Don't do that. Zahir said, "Latajiduni ya Rasulullah kasidan." He said, "O Messenger of Allah, you will find me worthless. Nobody sees any good in me. Nobody sees any value in me." And the Prophet ﷺ had to redirect him, take his attention off of seeking validation from the people and seek validation from none other than God. He said, "Bal anta indallahi ghalin." He said, "No, to God, you are priceless. To the people, you are worthless. To God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are priceless. There is no price tag on you in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People might see you as worthless, but to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're special. Don't you know one male ejaculation is enough to impregnate every woman on the face of the earth. One man has the power to impregnate with one ejaculation millions and millions of sperm cells. He has the power to impregnate every single woman on the face of the earth. One man. So why am I saying that? I'm saying that out of millions and millions and millions of sperm cells that was put into your mother, you made it. How could you not be special? How could you not be special in the sight of God? I don't care how the world sees you. The world may never see your value. The world may never see your worth. Some of us spend our entire lives hustling for validation. Our entire lives. Trying to get people to recognize how special we are. Trying to get people to recognize how important we are. And we do this by, we have a myriad of ways of doing this. Our accomplishments, you know what I mean? Or I got my master's degree. I got my PhD. Accomplishments, achievements, material possessions. We want everybody to see how valuable we are. How important we are. But the fact of the matter is that there are some people that will never see your value. Some of them may be your own siblings. Your own siblings may never see you as being worth anything. You will always be insignificant in their eyes. This is the plight of African Americans here in North America. We have for generations have been trying to prove our value and our worth to people who don't give a damn about us. Constantly trying to prove our value to people who exploit our value. They exploit us every moment. If you're not dancing and singing and cooning, if you're not playing basketball, shooting a basketball, or catching a basketball, or making somebody laugh as a comedian, you don't mean jack to them. If they can't benefit off you, they can't exploit you, they can't take advantage of you, you don't mean anything to them. They don't give a damn about you. But we steady trying to say, "Hey, boss, I'm valuable. Look at me, boss. I'm valuable." Steady trying to prove your worth. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Bal anta indallahi ghalin." He said, "No, to Allah you are priceless." So Zahir, the brothers of Yusuf, they sold him for a measly price, few dirhams, darahima ma'duda, wa kana fihi min az-zahidin. They saw him as insignificant, worthless. However, here's your lesson number 18. Here's your lesson number 18. Pay attention to the end of the ayah. We're on ayah number 20. At the end of the ayah, and they saw him as being insignificant. They saw him as being insignificant then. But as we know, the tables always turn. And your lesson number 18 is never belittle someone because of how insignificant they appear today, because tomorrow is a completely different day. Never belittle or devalue someone because of how insignificant they look like today, because tomorrow is another day. The brothers of Yusuf saw Yusuf as insignificant on that day, but 40 years later, when he became the governor of Egypt, they needed him. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. And these are the days that we rotate between people. One day you see the person is insignificant. The next day the person is the CEO of a company that you trying to get a job at. Right? The same people we seen as insignificant. Some of these same children that we used to chase off the block, go in the house, I'm going to tell your mother, and pop them, and whatever the case may be. Look at us now. Some of us are, in complete control of our own lanes. You understand? So if you fast forward to surah number 12, ayah 58, go to ayah 58. This is when there was a drought, right? Remember when Yusuf got out of prison, he translated the dream. He interpreted the dream of the king, right? He said that he saw 7 fat cows eating 7 skinny cows, right? And Yusuf interpreted that dream as there was going to be 7 years of drought, right? But in the 7 years of drought, Yusuf was so smart from learning from the Aziz, being raised in the house of the Aziz. He learned how to manage money. He was good with money. He was good with managing, the materials. He was the treasurer of Egypt, the second in command, the second most powerful man in Egypt. That's the individual that Yusuf became before he became a prophet. Before he was a prophet, he was the second most powerful man in Egypt. He was the head of the treasury, the state treasury of Egypt. And he was smart enough to manage everything so that when there was a drought, he was able to save and stash. So his brothers came all the way from Palestine to Egypt, asking him. They didn't know it was Yusuf at the time, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةَ يُوسُفُ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and the brothers of Yusuf came to Yusuf. They didn't know it was Yusuf. He was now the second most powerful man in Egypt, responsible for Egypt's treasury. And they were experiencing a drought in Palestine. So they came from Palestine to Egypt, asking the king of Egypt for, material, food, supplies to handle the drought. So while they sold Yusuf for a few coins because they saw him as insignificant, later on they needed him. These are the days that we rotate between people. So never belittle someone because of how insignificant they appear today, because tomorrow is another day. Tomorrow is another day. Go to 1258. So 1220 and 1258 are connected. 1258 shows the other side of 1220. The ayat 1220, Allah said, وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, and they considered him insignificant. But there was a time later on, years later, and they would have never thought in their minds that years later they would have ever needed Yusuf. Can you think about that? Think about someone that you belittle, you disrespect, or whatever the case may be, somebody that you consider to be nothing, balash, nothing, last shade. He's nothing, right? And we usually do that when we think we don't need a person. When a person feel like they don't need you anymore, look at how they treat you. They treat you like crap. When a person feel like they don't need you anymore, look at how they treat you. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, look at how your child treats you when the child feel like, I'm out on my own, I don't need you no more. And look at how disrespectful the child becomes towards you because they feel like they don't need you no more. Look at the spouse. When the spouse is on the way out the door, husband on his way out the door, wife is on her way out the door. Look at how they treat the individual because they don't need you anymore. Right? They treat you like crap. But they don't realize that in that moment is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is powerful enough to bring that situation 360 where you will need that person. You will need that person. And they did. They came from Palestine all the way to Egypt, asking the second most powerful man in Egypt for supplies to help them through the drought, not even realizing that the man that they were asking for supplies, asking for handouts, begging literally for handouts to help deal with the drought that they were experiencing, they didn't realize in that moment that that was the same little boy that y'all beat up, you pulled the shirt off of, and you threw into the bottom of a well, and you sold him for a few coins. SubhanAllah. So powerful. Moving right along. We move on to ayat number 21. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرَ لِامْرَأَتِهِ أَكْرِمِي مَثْوَاهُ عَسَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلِنُعَلِّمَهُ تَأْوِيلَ الْأَحَادِيثِ وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَى أَمْرِهِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moving right in deeper into this story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرَ. And the one who purchased him in Egypt, talking about the Aziz. The Aziz, as Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said his name is Kitfir. His name was Kitfir, right? He was the second most powerful man in Egypt. He's second to the king, whose name was Rayyan at that time. Right? Second most powerful man in Egypt, in all of Egypt. He happened to be passing by the marketplace where slaves were sold. He just so happened, and is that a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. Is it a coincidence that the people in the caravan lost their way and ended up over here by this well and just so happened to find this little boy in a well? That's not a coincidence. Is it a coincidence that by the time they got to Egypt, they put him on the market to be sold, and the second most powerful man in Egypt just so happened to be passing by the marketplace where slaves were being sold? You think that was a coincidence? Not a coincidence. As Allah says at the end of the ayah, وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَى أَمْرِهِ. And Allah was in total control of his affair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was behind the wheel the entire time. It's no coincidence. No such thing as a coincidence. So the Aziz of Misr, the Aziz of Egypt, right? The second most powerful man in Egypt just so happened to be passing by the market where the slaves were being sold. And what does he do? He looks up only to see the face of Yusuf. Looks up only to see the face of Yusuf, caught his attention. Here again, that beauty being a blessing. We've seen instances where Yusuf's beauty was a curse, but now we're seeing it be a blessing. Because as he's passing by the marketplace where the slaves are being sold, they got all these little boys standing up, grown men, little boys standing up, and they're being sold in the marketplace. He happens to be riding by and looks over, and the face of Yusuf catches his attention. Who is this beautiful little boy? This handsome little boy. This handsome little boy. And as the narration mentioned, he saw from Yusuf, he walked over to Yusuf and he began talking to him. What's your name? Where you from? You know, how did you end up here? He noticed that Yusuf had adab. He had good manners. He was Rashid. He was Rashid. He seemed like he was, he was rightly guided. Like he knew what he was doing. He seemed smart, seemed intelligent, unlike all of the other slaves. Something special about this kid. So he bought Yusuf from the people from the caravan who brought him to Egypt. He purchased him, right? And then he turns to his wife and he says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرَ لِامْرَأَتِهِ. And the one who purchased him in Egypt said to his wife, right? And his wife's name, as some scholars say, her name was Ra'il, and some of the scholars say her name was Zuleykha. So, Kitfir, the Aziz of Egypt, he says to his wife Zuleykha, he said, Akrimi mathwai. Honor him for as long as he stays with us. Honor him. So as long as he stays with us. As long as he lives in our home, that we have him with us, honor him. Treat him honorably, right? And him saying to his wife, Akrimi mathwai, treat him honorably as he stays with us. He said, Asa ayyan fa'ana, perhaps he will bring benefit to us. He will bring benefit to our family. Look at the optimism, right? Look at the optimism. He said, honor him, and perhaps he'll bring some benefit to our family. Or we will take him as a son, because he didn't have any children with Zulaykha. He didn't have any kids. So he said, maybe we can, raise him, teach him the business, and he'll come back as a benefit for us, or we could just take him as a son. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And this was the way that we rooted Yusuf firmly in Egypt. He got uprooted from Palestine and he moved to Egypt, and this is where he was going to lay his roots, in Egypt. Because now he's being raised in a castle with the second most powerful man in Egypt. You understand? He's not no, slave that was sold to some, hermits, or slave that was sold to some peasants. He was sold to the Aziz of Egypt, the second most powerful man in Egypt, living in a qasr, living in a mansion, living in a castle. So he's going to be taught adab, he's going to be fed differently, he's going to be raised differently. His living is going to be a lot different. But he told his wife, honor him. And the wife honored him. And we're going to see how Yusuf repaid this man for that. Understand something. People respond a lot differently to mercy than they do to harshness. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. That it was by the mercy of Allah, you, O Muhammad, were merciful and compassionate to your companions. Because by being merciful to them, you win their hearts. He said, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were harsh and hard-hearted, they would have ran away from you. People respond differently to mercy. People respond differently. Throughout this entire situation, this was the first time that Yusuf was shown mercy and compassion. Think about it. From the time his brothers took him from his father and they began beating him up, took his shirt off him, dropped him in the well, until the fact that the people, the caravan, they came, and instead of having mercy upon him, they took him and they sold him. And then they took him to Egypt and they sold him again. They sold him twice. This was the first time throughout this entire ordeal that Yusuf had been shown some mercy and compassion. Obviously, that was going to affect him unlike anything else. Here's the second wealthiest, most powerful man in Egypt, and he takes this kid who just had the most horrendous ordeal, and he takes him and he tells his wife, honor him. Whatever he needs, give him. Treat him like one of ours. Treat him as if he is our son. Honor him. His stay with us will be honorable. This was the first time that he had been shown mercy by anybody throughout this whole situation. And we're talking about a kid. We're talking about a 7-8-year-old kid, man. He's been shown nothing but harsh treatment from people that were older than him since the beginning of the story. You think about a child. I grew up in foster care, so I know what children in foster care go through. You're experiencing some of the most horrible experiences at the hands of adults. You're put into this home, and these parents, they beat you, they yell at you, they use profanity, they talk to you any type of way. And then you're taken from that home and you're put into another home. And these parents, they beat you, they yell at you, they use profanity, they beat you with things like a belt, an extension cord, right? Yeah, we grew up in the early 80s where that was, admissible. That was permissible. You got beat with whatever they could find to beat you with. You were verbally abused. You were psychologically abused. You were physically abused, all at the hands of adults who you would expect they would have mercy upon you, understanding your condition. Understanding that you were taken out of the home of your biological parents because of a drug addiction or because of your own parents abusing you. Your own parents abusing you. Wallahi, I'll never forget. In the foster home that I was in, There was this young kid. I don't know if this guy is still alive or whatever the case may be. I'm not even going to say his name because he might be Muslim and he might be listening. I don't even want to say his name, but I never forgot this kid. This kid, I was about 8. I was about 8 years old, which is why the story resonates so much with me. I was about 8 years old. This kid was 4 years old. 4 years old. And my foster mother went to go get him from DIFAS, from the Department of Human and Family Services, right? This kid, man, subhanAllah, he had burn marks on the bottom of his buttocks because his parents decided to take him, because he was crying so much, take him, pick him up, and sit him on top of a hot plate. Sit him on top of a hot plate. Burnt the bottom of his butt, burnt his nutsack, his scrotum, all of it. I was responsible because I was 8, so I used to have to give them a bath. I was responsible for an 8-year-old kid. Right? And this is how molestation happens. This is how inappropriate touching happened. Here you are a parent, but you got this 8-year-old kid washing up another complete stranger. Right? So I'm washing the kid up and I'm looking at his buttocks and I'm like, what the heck, man? I'm 8. And I'm being made a witness to this, man. I will never forget that image, man. I will never in my life forget the image that I saw on the bottom of this kid's butt. This kid was 4 years old, man. 4 years old. And his parents took him and sat him on top of a hot plate and it burnt the bottom of his butt and the bottom of his scrotum. All at the hands of parents. All at the hands of adults. These are children that have passed through the foster care system from home to home to home, being verbally, physically, emotionally, psychologically abused by parents, by adults. By adults, man. I kid you not. Anybody who works in that field knows exactly what I'm talking about. By adults. So in this situation, when the Aziz of Egypt says to his wife, Ikrimi mathwai, honor his stay. Let his stay with us be honorable. You understand? This was the first time throughout this whole ordeal that Yusuf was shown mercy by an adult. His brothers older than him beat him, threw him, sold him into slavery. The people on the caravan took him instead of finding out where his parents were and how he ended up in the well, took him, bought him from their brothers, took him to Egypt, away from his home, away from his parents, away from, took a child to Egypt, from Palestine all the way to Egypt. No mercy, no compassion, no nothing, right? Then gets to Egypt and then puts him on the slave block, the slave selling block. We're going to sell you off as a slave. And then to have the second most powerful man in Egypt catch his eye, come over, buy him, and then begin talking to him, and then tell his wife, Ekrimi mathwai, for as long as he lives with us, make his stay honorable. This was the first time that Yusuf had ever been shown any mercy from an adult in this entire situation. I want you guys to think about, put yourself in the shoes of a 7, 8-year-old kid in this situation. I want you to think about that. Looking from a child's perspective. So the Prophet ﷺ told, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ that it was by the mercy of Allah that you were merciful to your companions. Because if you were harsh and hard-hearted, they would have fled from around you. لَنْ فَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, they would have ran away from you. Because people respond differently to mercy than they do harshness. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُعْتِي عَلَى الرِّفْقِ مَا لَا يُعْتِي عَلَى الْعُنْفِ, that Allah will bless a situation that is comprised of gentleness, unlike He will bless a situation that comprises of harshness. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَا كَانَ الرِّفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَ وَمَا كَانَ الْعُنْفُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَ. That gentleness is not infused into any situation except that it beautifies it. Gentleness is not infused into any situation except that it beautifies it. And harshness is not infused into any situation except that it makes it worse. It makes it worse. All right? So I want you to see how Yusuf repays this. And the lesson here, lesson number 19 for you, is that when you do good to people, it comes back to you. When you do good, you get good. You do good, you get good. You do good to people, it come back to you. The Aziz, he did good to Yusuf. He did right by Yusuf. He told his wife, unlike the people on the caravan who took him and tucked him away and sold him. No, the Aziz bought him, began to find out his story, his why, and then told his wife, honor him for as long as he stays with us. So the Aziz and the travelers, they were polar opposites. The travelers, they did treachery because there was nothing but treachery in this story from beginning to end. This whole story is about treachery. This entire story is about treachery from the beginning to the end. The brothers were treacherous. The people in the caravan were treacherous. As we're going to see, the wife of the Aziz ended up being treacherous. So much treachery going on in this story. Betrayal in this story. But when you do good, you get good. It comes back to you. The energy that you put out in the world comes back to you. Sometimes when you least expect it. And sometimes when you don't expect it at all. The Aziz did not know at that moment when he told his wife, honor his stay. He didn't realize how that was going to come back to him. You understand? He didn't realize how that was going to come back to him. How Yusuf was going to repay the favor to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rahman, Surah Al-Rahman, one of my favorite surahs in the Quran, Surah number 55, ayat 60. Turn to 55, ayat 60. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what? Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan. Is not the reward for good anything but good. When you do good, can you expect anything other than good to come back to you? This is a rhetorical question. This is a rhetorical question. It's like when Allah says, ilahum ma'allah, is there another God besides Allah? Obviously not. It's a rhetorical question to bring your attention to the importance of what he's saying. When Allah asks a rhetorical question, he's trying to grab your attention. Because obviously the answer is no. But Allah is not asking. A rhetorical question is not for the purpose of an answer. It's a purpose to get your attention. Ilahu ma'allah, is there another God besides Allah? وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا, and who could be more truthful in their speech other than Allah? Obviously nobody. But it's bringing your attention to how honest and how truthful God is when he speaks. So why don't you listen? When God speaks, if there can be nobody more trustworthy, more honorable, more truthful in their speech than God, then why is it when God speaks you don't listen? Why is it when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks you don't listen? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan. Is not the reward of good anything but good? When you do good, can you expect anything but good to come back to you? Sometimes when you least expect it. And of course, as the scholars, they say, wal aksu bil aks, and the opposite is the same. The reward for evil is nothing but evil. As Allah mentions in another ayah in Surah Ash-Shura, turn to Surah number 42, ayat 40. Turn number 42, Surah 42, ayat 40. What does Allah say here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. And the reward of evil is an evil just like it. So now you have two ayats. So as Muslims, I don't want to get into this whole debate of using karma, whatever the case may be, but we do understand that the energy that you put out is what will come back to you based upon these two ayats. The first ayat is in Surah Al-Rahman, Surah 55, ayat 60. Allah says, Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan. Cannot the reward of good be anything but good? Meaning you put out good, you can expect nothing but good in return. In another ayat in Surah number 42, ayat 40, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. And the reward of evil is an evil just like it. Meaning you put evil out there, you can expect nothing but evil to come back to you. Call it karma, call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not playing semantics. I ain't got time for the Muslims and your semantics. Call it whatever energy you put out in the world will come back to you. The boomerang effect. The boomerang effect. Your actions have a boomerang effect. And Yaqub alayhi salam, I don't know if we'll have time for questions and answers. Maybe one day I'll just open up. Maybe tomorrow I'll just kind of open up just for questions and answers. I know we kind of go all the way into the time of the time of the adhan, of iftar, of maghrib, and I hardly ever leave room for questions. And I know some people may have some, questions or comments or things like that. So maybe tomorrow, inshallah, I'll just kind of open up just so we can kind of review some of the lessons and things that we've discussed and just have an open discussion about it, inshallah. All right. Let me see what my schedule looks like, inshallah. All right. I'm not opposed to that. But the Aziz, he didn't even know that when he made that statement to his wife, Akrimi mathwai, honor his stay with us, he didn't even realize how he was going to be compensated for that act of good. He didn't even realize how he was going to be compensated. No, I mean, tomorrow, I'm not going to interrupt our class for questions and answers. Our schedule for the class will remain as it is. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. I don't want to interrupt that. But tomorrow, which is Tuesday, perhaps if my schedule is flexible enough, then inshallah, I'll open up at 6:30, just to kind of do an open discussion. All right. I think some of you guys have been holding in a lot of stuff as it relates to this story, and you kind of just want to kind of get that out. And I want to provide you with the platform to do that, inshallah. So he said, Asa ayyan fa'na, perhaps he will bring some benefit to us. Meaning, excuse me 1 second. Give me 1 second. How much was it? Okay, give him the other $1.78. Okay, so he said perhaps we could draw some benefit from it. All right, and that means that when he reaches a particular age where he can be of benefit to the family, he will that will come back to him. All right. Or he said we can take him as a son. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is the way that we establish Yusuf in the earth, meaning establish Yusuf in Egypt. Instagram, you guys are going to cut off. I'm going to cut you off now and then start it back up, inshallah. So he said that this was the way that we established Yusuf in the land, meaning established him in Egypt, all right, as one of the second most powerful individual in Egypt, all right. And I want you to think about all of the events that led up to Yusuf ending up in Egypt. All right. The whole goal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was for those who would later become the descendants of the brothers of Yusuf, who we will later know as Bani Israel, right? Bani Israel, meaning the children of Israel, the children of Yaqub. All of what took place was for Bani Israel before they were Bani Israel, their parents, to go from Palestine to Egypt so that Allah could establish Bani Israel in Egypt. And then, of course, live, long enough to welcome Prophet Musa, who will eventually conquer Fir'aun, who they will eventually take them from Egypt and go back to Palestine, which, of course, is the promised land. قَدَّسَهَا اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى مِنَ الْخَبَائِثِ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify Palestine from all of the filth and the people who have, usurped that land for their own agenda, for their own purposes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free the Palestinians. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow peace and solace and longevity on the Palestinian people. One of some of the most toughest people that you could ever come across. Some of the most sincere, some of the toughest, most sincere Muslims that you could ever come across, man. SubhanAllah. Anyway, but you have to look at the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of this happened so that Bani Israel could end up in Egypt and then conquer Fir'aun. And then Musa was to take them from Egypt back to Palestine. All right. And this was all a part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, he uses you. And this is lesson number 20. Lesson number 20 is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, he uses you as a part of his plan to bring his plan into fruition. Think about everything that has happened in your own life and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used you. Some of you were probably not practicing Muslims, right? At a particular time in your life. And you were surrounded by other family members that weren't practicing Muslims. But somewhere along the line, you had some trials, some misfortunes, something happened to you, and you begin to turn your life around. And you begin to make a 360. And in you making a 360, you begin to collect people along with you, along that journey, who are there with you. And, it was all part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. From the very beginning. From the very beginning. It takes a little thought, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was using you. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ قَوْمٍ إِسْتَعْمَلَهُم, that when Allah loves a people, he uses them. And as the scholars say, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَعْرِفْ مَقَامَكَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ يَسْتَعْمِلُكَ. If you want to see your position with God, you want to see the status that you hold with Allah, look at how he's using you. Is Allah using you to open doors for people, or is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaving you to your own vices and letting shaitan use you? Because you're being used one way or the other. Either shaitan is using you or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using you. Either shaitan is using you to confuse Muslims, chase Muslims away from Islam, right? And confuse Muslims about their religion. That is shaitan using you. God is not using you. Don't misconstrue the two. Shaitan is using you to chase Muslims away from Islam, to, confuse Muslims about the practice of their religion, being harsh with people and chasing them away from Islam. That's not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the ayah that I just mentioned to you, that if it wasn't for the mercy of Allah on you, that you were merciful to them. You understand? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals in mercy. So when you see Muslims being harsh and treating other Muslims harsh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not using you. Shaitan is using you. Allah left you to your own vices a long time ago. Shaitan has been using you for the longest. There's some from amongst us, shaitan has been using us for the longest to chase Muslims away from Islam, to confuse Muslims about their religion. Absolutely. Shaitan is using you. And then there's some from amongst us who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using you. Allah is using you to open doors for people who never had an opportunity to learn anything about Islam, and now they have an opportunity to learn. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using you to open doors for even non-Muslims who, some of you have invited some of your non-Muslim friends, hey, come listen. Hey, listen to this, bringing them. And Allah is using you. You want to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you want to see your status with Allah? Look at how he's using you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was using Yusuf throughout the whole story. But you have to understand something, that when God uses you, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses you, you have to be prepared to go the distance. That's the other issue. That sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses you, but some of us, we ain't built for the journey. Allah's using you, but you're not built for the journey. You ain't built for the journey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you in the right direction. He will protect you from anything that's going to thwart his plan. He will supply you with everything that you need along your journey, but you have to do the footwork. The tahammul. You have to endure. You have to do the footwork. Allah's going to give you everything that you need. And there's some of us who, and this journey ain't for the faint-hearted. Obviously, look at the prophets and messengers. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاء ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلْ فَالْأَمْثَلْ. The most severely tested people are the prophets and messengers. And then those that are like them in faith, and then those that are like them in faith. Some people just not built for the journey. Some people not built for the journey. Some people started off, it looked like Allah was using them, and then they couldn't handle it. How do you handle it? What are some of the things that you got to tolerate along the journey as Allah is using you? You got to deal with people calling you names. They called the Prophet ﷺ names, right? They called him sahirun, kadhabun. They called him a liar. They called him a magician. They called him a kahin. They called him a soothsayer. They called him, magician. They called him all types of names, right? You gotta be willing to handle that. They're going to call you a deviant. They're going to call you a person of bid'ah, person of innovation, a deviant. They're going to call you a black nationalist. They're going to call you all types of stuff. You got to be able to humble. You got to be able to walk it. Allah's going to use you, but you got to be able to do the footwork. How else they going to use you? They're going to plot to kill you, right? The Prophet ﷺ, they put a hit out on him in Mecca. 100 camels who bring me Muhammad dead or alive. You know what I mean? He's running for his life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to use you, but you got to be able to handle it. Some people are too cowardly. So whenever they get confronted with some drama, they run in the opposite direction because they can't handle it. It's like when Musa and Bani Israel, right? When they were going in the fight, right? And what the Bani Israel said, "Idhab anta wa rabbuka faqatila fa inna hahuna qa'idun." You and your Lord go in there and fight. We're gonna wait out here. We're gonna stay right here. Some don't want to fight. We only want to fight for Islam when it's behind a computer. We only want to fight for Islam when it's convenient for us. We only want to fight for Islam when we got a squad of individuals around us. That ain't gonna cut it. That ain't gonna cut it. Prophets done been thrown in fire. Prophets done been thrown in wells. Prophets done been, like you name it. Prophets done been ordered to slaughter their own sons. Prophets done lost their children. Prophet Nuh alayhi salam watched his son drown right in front of him. You understand? You got to be built for that. He didn't turn on his heels. He said, He said, "Oh my Lord, inna ibni min ahli, my son is from my family." Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, take his family and get on the boat. So he thought that his son was a part of his family. So when he saw his son being drowned, he said, "Oh my Lord, my son is from my family." And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Innahu laysa min ahlik." He's not from your family. "Innahu amalun ghayra salih." He has deeds that are unrighteous, that are unbefitting for him to be called your family. And don't address me about that which you have no knowledge of. And afterwards, Prophet Noah, he repented. He asked Allah for forgiveness for, even questioning God, even questioning him. You understand? People done lost their kids. Prophets and messengers done lost their children. Prophets and messengers done lost their wives. You understand? Prophet Noah and Prophet Lut, both. Their wives betrayed them. They couldn't handle the journey. They didn't see that their wives were going in the opposite direction and say, God, I don't think I'm built for this. Some people, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, he uses you and he supplies you with everything you need, but you got to do the footwork. You got to do the footwork. And any student of knowledge that decides to tread this path, if you're not built for this, man, like take a look at the examples that came before you. You ain't even got to look at the prophets and messengers. Look at the people in our lifetime right now. Something that happened to Malcolm X that could possibly happen to me. It could possibly happen to anybody. There's nobody who is exempt from that type of outcome when you speak truth to power. Prophets done been killed. Prophets and messengers were murdered. They killed Prophet Yahya, and then they doubled back and killed his father, Zechariah. You understand? Prophets done been murdered for speaking truth to power. They tried to kill Prophet Isa, alayhi salam. Prophets done been murdered. If you ain't built for this path, man, then, you might want to go sit behind a desk, behind a computer. There's some people that's all they're good for is to be behind a computer writing refutations all day long. That's all you good for. Stay behind your computer, because you ain't built for stepping out in the forefront and taking a position of leadership and leading the Muslim community in the direction that they need to go. You ain't built for that. So stay behind your computer and keep refuting from behind the computer. And some of y'all keep following behind this nonsense, man. How you following behind somebody behind a computer? You've never seen this person out in the forefront take a stand on anything. You have never seen the person take a stand on anything. You've never seen the person come out in the forefront and take a stand against something that was oppressive and put Islam on the forefront. You've never seen that. You've seen the person behind the computer most of the time who remains anonymous. You don't even know who the hell he is or what he looks like. All you see is he wrote a long 3, 4, 5 page refutation, and that's enough to get you to follow them. That's enough to get you to follow them. Meanwhile, you got imams, students of knowledge, right out here on the front lines, taking the blows, taking the hits every single day for you. For you. While you sit back from your place of privilege and a place of convenience with your feet up on your phone. Oh, this was said about the brother. Oh, the brother said this, or this was said about that one. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. What's your deen worth, man? That's your Islam? From behind a computer, from behind a cell phone, to sit and say, oh, this person is a deviant, this person is a stray. That's easy. Anybody can do that. But when have you ever taken a stand for Islam? When have you ever stood against oppression? When have you ever spoke truth to power? Ever. Even some of the people who claim to be Muslim leaders out here, when have you ever stood up against something that was like real injustice? Real injustice. Going to a fundraiser where you're guarded and protected is one thing. Coming out into the community and standing with, in solidarity with Muslims. You stand in solidarity with the LGBT. You stand in solidarity with, this one and that one. You stand in solidarity with everybody but the Muslims. You stand in solidarity with everybody but the Muslims who need the solidarity. African-American Muslims who have paved the way for a lot of these speakers, who these speakers wouldn't even be who they are today had it not been for the blood, sweat, and tears of the African-American Muslims who laid down the foundation so that immigrant Muslims can come here and do your $1 million, $1 billion fundraisers. Great, mashallah. You got a great, beautiful facility worth $1.6 billion. Everybody live in the suburbs. Everybody got big, beautiful houses, and you go to fundraisers for fun. You go to fundraisers for fun. You go to 3-day conferences for recreational purposes so you and your children can get out of the house. Meanwhile, you got Muslims in some of these inner cities that are actually putting in the work. You understand? I mean, it is what it is. Then we talk about we standing in solidarity with the LGBT. They have a right to be gay. All right, we have a right to be Muslim. We have a right to be black. I ain't never heard you jokers stand up for that. I got a right to be black. And we was black before there was a such thing as a LGBT. But you'll stand in solidarity with them and you won't say a damn thing about all of the oppression and the marginalization that's going on in the Muslim community, in the Muslim ranks. You ain't even got to look at what the non-Muslims do. We talk about amongst Muslims. Gotta be kidding me, man. this fake advocacy that you guys are championing. Oh, mashallah, brother imam this or this imam that. Man, get out of here, man. You wouldn't know what real leadership looked like if it was staring you right in your face. You wouldn't know what real leadership looked like if it was staring you right in your face, man. But you keep going on with your, with your advocacy and, for this one and that one, kudos to you. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He loves you, He uses you. Allah says, وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. That Allah was in full control of His situation, but most of the people have no knowledge. I'm going to give you, just as a teaser, the beginning of the next ayat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when Yusuf reached the age of strength and maturity, we gave him wisdom and we gave him knowledge, and thus do we reward the good doers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that when Yusuf reached the pinnacle of strength in his youth, in his youthful age, some of the scholars say that he was 18 years old. Some of the scholars say that he was 20 years old. Some of the scholars say he was 33 years old. Some of the scholars say he was 30, right? Nonetheless, we know that Yusuf was between 18 to 30 years old at this point. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of like pushes the fast forward button, right? To kind of push us forward a little bit in the story. So fast forward, another 12 years, another 22 years, fast forward, and we're going to show you now what happens to him in adulthood. Some of the scholars assert that at this time, Yusuf was 33 years old. This was the position of Mujahid and Ibn Abbas. Duhaq said he was 20 years old. Imam al-Tabari, he has a very beautiful summary of what his age was. Imam al-Tabari said, Ashudda huwa intiha quwwatihi wa shababihi. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ, and when he reached the age of strength, Imam al-Tabari, he said that this is intiha quwwatihi. This is the pinnacle of his strength in his youth, right? وجائز أن يكون أتاه ذلك وهو ابن 18 سنة. He said, and it is permissible for us to say that he was around 18. It's permissible for us to say that he was around 20 or he was 30 or 33. He said the Quran does not specify exactly what his age was, nor is it specified in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, nor do we have any ijma', nor do we have any consensus amongst the Sahaba or the scholars as to what his exact age was. He said, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ ذَلِكَ مَوْجُودًا مِنْ وَجْهِ الَّذِي ذُكِرَتْ. He said, and so if there is no specific number mentioned in any of the three things that we mentioned, whether in the Quran, in the Sunnah, or the ijma', the consensus of the scholars, he said, فَالصَّوَابِ أَن يُقَالُ فِيهِ كَمَا قَالَ اللَّهُ جَلَ وَعَلَى حَتَّى تَثْبُتْ الْحُجَّةُ الصَّحِيحَةُ. He said, then it is, what is appropriate is that we leave it general as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it general until there is some dalil, some evidence that comes to us that says emphatically that this was his age. All right. So he was between the ages of 18 to 33. All right. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him ilman, hukman wa ilman, wisdom and knowledge. And we'll talk about this as we come to our next lesson, lesson number 21, inshallah ta'ala, on Wednesday. You guys have been great. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa salama tasliman kathira. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.